Operation Anthropoid, the most important assassination of WW2A narrative script for voice performance. The date is May 27, 1942. A black Mercedes convertible winds through the streets of Prague, carrying one of the most feared men in Nazi Germany. His name is Reinhard Heydrich, the Butcher of Prague, architect of the final solution, and Heinrich Himmler's right hand. In less than an hour, two Czech paratroopers hiding near a hairpin turn will change the course of World War II forever. This is the story of Operation Anthropoid, the mission that killed the man Hitler called the Man with the Iron Heart, and the unimaginable price that followed. Prague, 1941. The city that was once the jewel of Central Europe now suffocates under the Nazi boot. The Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, as the Germans call it, is ruled with calculated brutality by Reinhard Heydrich. He is not just another Nazi administrator. He is something far more dangerous. At 37 years old, Heydrich has already orchestrated the Kristallnacht pogroms, established the machinery of the Holocaust, and personally chaired the Wannsee Conference where the systematic murder of Europe's Jews was formalized. His efficiency is terrifying. His cruelty is legendary. The Czechs call him the hangman. Hitler sees him as the perfect successor. In London, the Czechoslovak government in exile faces a desperate problem. Since the Munich Agreement handed their country to Hitler, they've become invisible on the world stage. The British barely acknowledge them. The Americans don't recognize them at all. Edvard Beneš, the exiled president, knows his nation's sovereignty depends on one thing: proving the Czech people are actively resisting. Not just enduring occupation, but fighting it. He needs a dramatic act of defiance, something so bold the world cannot ignore it. His intelligence chief, František Moravec, proposes the unthinkable: assassinate Reinhard Heydrich. The plan is given a codename that means human-like. Operation Anthropoid. Choosing the men for this suicide mission requires a special kind of calculation. They need soldiers skilled enough to succeed, expendable enough to send, and brave enough to accept near certain death. From the hundreds of Czech soldiers training in Britain, 2 men are selected. Jan Kubis, 28 years old, a sergeant with steady hands and a gift for explosives. Josef Gabčík, 30 years old, a staff sergeant and expert marksman with ice in his veins. Neither man harbors illusions about their chances of survival. Both volunteer anyway. For months, they train in the Scottish Highlands, learning British commando tactics, studying Heydrich's routines, memorizing Prague streets from photographs and maps. They practice with specialized weapons, a modified Sten gun, British anti-tank mines converted into grenades. By December 1941, they're as ready as they'll ever be. On the night of December 28, 1941, a modified Halifax bomber roars through freezing darkness over Czechoslovakia. Inside, 7 paratroopers prepare to jump, including Kubis and Gabčík. The plane has already aborted this mission twice due to weather. Tonight, despite ice forming on the wings and zero visibility, the pilot pushes through. At 10:35 p.m., the green light flashes. The men jump into the howling void above their occupied homeland. Kubis lands badly, injuring his head. Gabčík disappears into deep snow and wanders for hours before finding shelter. The other teams scatter across the countryside. The entire drop is nearly a disaster, but somehow, all 7 men survive the night. The mission, impossible from the start, has actually begun. For months, Kubis and Gabčík hide in Prague's underground resistance network, moving between safe houses, gathering intelligence, watching Heydrich's patterns. The Butcher of Prague is shockingly careless with his personal security. He rides in an open-top Mercedes without bodyguards, following the same route to his office each morning. His arrogance is their opportunity. The resistance debates the morality of the mission constantly. Everyone knows what will follow. Nazi reprisals will be savage. Innocent people will die. Some resistance leaders argue against it, but Kubis and Gabčík have their orders from London. They will not abort. They identify the perfect ambush site, a hairpin turn in the Holsovis district where Heydrich's car must slow to navigate the curve. On May 27, 1942, they take their positions. The morning is warm and bright. At 10:30 a.m., Heydrich leaves his villa in Panensk-Brezhny, his wife waving from the doorway. He's feeling confident. The night before, he learned he's been appointed acting Reich Protector of France. Another promotion, another conquered nation to terrorize. His driver, SS Oberscharfer Klein, steers the dark green Mercedes-Benz through Prague streets. Neither man notices the three men waiting at the tram stop on V. Holsovikakak Street. Rela Fafek serves as lookout, a small mirror in his hand to signal when the target approaches. Gabčík stands nearest the curve, the Sten gun hidden under his coat. Kubis waits 10 meters behind, a converted anti-tank mine modified into a hand grenade tucked in his briefcase. Everything depends on the next 60 seconds. At 10:32 a.m., the mirror flashes. Heydrich's Mercedes appears, slowing for the hairpin turn exactly as predicted. Gabčík steps forward, pulls the Sten gun from his coat, aims at the open car just meters away. This is the moment. He squeezes the trigger. Nothing happens. The gun jams. Heydrich sees the weapon, sees the man, sees death failing to arrive. Instead of ordering Klein to accelerate away, Heydrich makes a fatal decision born of pure arrogance. He stands up in the moving car and reaches for his own pistol, ordering Klein to stop. He will personally kill this Czech terrorist. It's the last mistake he'll ever make. Kubis, seeing Gabčík's failure, pulls the modified mine from his briefcase and hurls it at the slowing Mercedes. The explosion is catastrophic. The blast tears through the car's right side, shredding metal and upholstery. Shrapnel, springs from the car seats, and fragments of the bomb itself rip into Heydrich's lower back and spleen. Klein, wounded but functional, stumbles from the car and chases Gabčík, firing wildly. Gabčík shoots back with his pistol, wounding Klein, then escapes on a bicycle. Kubis, also wounded by his own bomb, flees in the opposite direction, blood streaming from his face. Heydrich, incredibly, climbs out of the destroyed Mercedes and staggers after them for a few steps before collapsing against a lamppost. A butcher's van stops to help. The driver and a woman load the Butcher of Prague into the back of the vehicle and rush him to Bulovka Hospital. Heydrich is still conscious, still defiant, ordering the doctors around even as his life drains away. The Nazi response begins immediately. Within hours, Prague is sealed. Checkpoints appear on every street. The Gestapo launches the largest manhunt in occupied Europe's history. 10,000 suspects are arrested in the first week. Adolf Hitler, upon hearing his golden boy has been attacked, flies into apocalyptic rage. He demands the execution of 10,000 Czechs as immediate reprisal. Himmler talks him down, but barely. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Heydrich receives treatment from the Reich's best doctors, flown in from Berlin. They operate on his wounds, remove shrapnel, pump him full of new wonder drugs including sulfonamides. For a week, he seems to be recovering. He jokes with nurses. He plans revenge. Then on June 3, infection sets in. His condition deteriorates rapidly. On June 4, 1942, at 4:30 a.m., Reinhard Heydrich dies in agony, killed by a mixture of bomb fragments, horsehair from the car seats, and sepsis. Hitler declares a day of national mourning. Heydrich receives a state funeral in Berlin that rivals anything given to royalty. His coffin lies in state in the courtyard of Prague Castle, then is transported to Berlin where the highest-ranking Nazis pay tribute. Hitler himself delivers the eulogy, calling Heydrich irreplaceable. But the real response isn't ceremony. It's vengeance. The Reich will make Czechoslovakia remember this assassination for generations. The reprisals begin with mass arrests and executions. Anyone with the remotest connection to the resistance is shot. Families of Czech soldiers serving abroad are rounded up and murdered. The Nazis are just warming up. The true horror is about to begin in a small mining village most people have never heard of. Its name is Lidice. Lidice is a quiet village of 500 people, 35 kilometers from Prague. Most residents are miners and their families. It has nothing to do with Operation Anthropoid. But the Gestapo receives a false tip suggesting Lidice sheltered the assassins. It doesn't matter that the information is wrong. Lidice will serve as a message. On June 9, 1942, German security police surround the village at 7:45 p.m. All inhabitants are ordered from their homes. The men and boys over 16 are separated from women and children. That night, in the garden of a local farmer named Horak, 173 men and boys are lined up in groups of 10 and shot. It takes hours. The executioners are rotated because even SS men grow tired of murder. The women, 184 of them, are sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp. Most will die there. The children, 82 in total, are sorted. Those deemed racially suitable for Germanization are sent to Nazi families. The others, the children who don't look German enough, are gassed at Chelmno. The village itself is burned to the ground, dynamited, plowed under, and erased from maps. Lidice ceases to exist. But the Nazis aren't finished. Another village, Lizaki, suffers the same fate days later because a resistance radio transmitter was found nearby. Every adult is executed. Every building destroyed. Across the Protectorate, the terror continues. Martial law brings thousands more arrests. Summary executions happen daily. The Czech resistance, which had been slowly growing, is almost completely destroyed. Safe houses are raided. Networks collapse. Informants, terrified of being next, betray their neighbors. The Gestapo offers massive rewards for information about the assassins. The pressure becomes unbearable. By mid-June, Kubis, Gabčík, and 5 other paratroopers are hiding in the crypt of the Church of Saints Cyril and Methodius in Prague's new town. They know it's only a matter of time. On June 18, 1942, at 4:15 a.m., the Gestapo surrounds the church. Someone has betrayed them, a resistance member broken under torture, revealing the hiding place for the blood money the Nazis offered. 800 SS and Gestapo personnel seal off the entire block. The battle begins at dawn. 4 paratroopers hiding in the church choir loft fight for 2 hours, firing through windows at the Germans below. Eventually, all 4 are killed or kill themselves to avoid capture. In the crypt below, Gabčík, Kubis, and 2 others remain hidden behind a stone wall. The Germans can't break through. They flood the crypt with fire hoses, trying to drown the men out. They pump in tear gas. They drop grenades through ventilation shafts. Nothing works. The siege lasts 6 hours. The men in the crypt fight with everything they have, rationing their ammunition, firing through small openings in the stone. Jan Kubis, already wounded from the assassination attempt and hit again during the church battle, bleeds to death in the flooded crypt. The others know there's no escape. Rather than be captured and tortured for information that could destroy what remains of the resistance, they make the final choice soldiers in hopeless positions sometimes make. Using their last bullets, they shoot themselves. When German forces finally break through at 10:45 a.m., they find only bodies in the water. Gabčík's finger is still on the trigger. The Nazis photograph everything for propaganda, but they've won nothing except corpses. The secrets died with the men. The retribution for harboring the assassins is equally savage. The Orthodox priests who provided sanctuary are executed. The families of the paratroopers are rounded up. In October 1942, in a final act of revenge, the Nazis execute 252 friends and relatives of the commandos, including Gabčík's mother and sister. The bishop who blessed the hiding place is tortured and killed. Even people who lived on the same street as a safe house are arrested. The Nazi message is clear: resistance brings not just your own death, but the annihilation of everyone you've ever known. The psychological warfare is as calculated as the physical violence. Break the will to resist by making the price unbearable. For a time, it works. The Czech resistance nearly stops existing. So the question becomes, was it worth it? Did Operation Anthropoid justify the ocean of blood that followed? More than 1,300 Czechs were murdered in direct reprisals. Thousands more were sent to camps. 2 entire villages were erased from existence. The resistance network that took years to build was shattered in weeks. Some historians argue the assassination was a catastrophic mistake, a symbolic gesture that cost far more than it gained. The British themselves were horrified by the reprisals, though they'd approved the mission. Even some members of the Czech government in exile questioned whether they'd made a terrible error. The price, measured in innocent lives, seems impossibly high for one dead Nazi, no matter how important. But there's another way to evaluate the operation, one that looks beyond the immediate horror to the larger strategic picture. Heydrich wasn't just another Nazi official. He was potentially Hitler's successor, a man combining fanatical ideology with genuine administrative brilliance. He made the machinery of genocide efficient. He was consolidating power, building networks, positioning himself for the highest levels of Reich leadership. His death created a power vacuum at a critical moment. It also shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility. For the first time, the occupied peoples of Europe saw a top Nazi leader killed in broad daylight. The psychological impact rippled across the continent. Resistance movements in other countries took notice. The Nazis could bleed. They could be hurt. They could die. Moreover, the reprisals, while devastating to Czechoslovakia, had an unintended consequence for Germany. The complete destruction of Lidice was so excessive, so brutal, so clearly targeting innocent civilians, that it became an international scandal. The Nazis tried to justify it as necessary suppression of terrorism, but the world saw it for what it was, mass murder. Allied propaganda seized on Lidice, using it to demonstrate Nazi barbarism. Towns in America, Mexico, and Brazil renamed themselves Lidice in solidarity. The massacre stiffened Allied resolve and made compromise with Nazi Germany unthinkable. Every child gassed at Chelmno, every woman who died at Ravensbrück, every man shot in Horak's garden became evidence in the court of world opinion. The Nazis lost the moral argument forever, if they ever had it. There's also the political dimension. Edvard Beneš's government in exile achieved exactly what it set out to accomplish. The assassination and the reprisals that followed proved beyond doubt that Czechoslovakia remained at war with Germany, that the Czech people were not passive subjects but active resistors. The Allies could no longer ignore or dismiss the government in exile. Britain and America strengthened their recognition. The Munich Agreement, that piece of paper that had sold Czechoslovakia to Hitler, was retroactively declared invalid. The post-war borders were guaranteed. In the brutal calculus of wartime politics, Operation Anthropoid purchased legitimacy with blood. The cost was unspeakable, but the outcome was the survival of Czech sovereignty and the foundation for post-war restoration. And perhaps most significantly, the operation demonstrated something profound about resistance under occupation. The men who volunteered for Anthropoid knew they were signing their own death warrants. Kubis and Gapsik understood they would not survive. The resistance members who sheltered them knew the risks. Yet they did it anyway, not because they were irrational or suicidal, but because they believed some things matter more than survival. National dignity. The refusal to collaborate with evil. The willingness to pay any price rather than accept subjugation. These aren't abstractions. They're the concrete choices real people made in impossible circumstances. Whether we call those choices heroic or tragic or both depends on whether we measure success in lives saved or principles upheld. Today, in Prague, there's a memorial at the Church of Saints Cyril and Methodius. The bullet holes in the wall remain, deliberately preserved. The crypt where the paratroopers made their last stand is a museum. People from around the world visit to pay respects to men who chose to fight the ultimate evil even when victory meant only death. There's a memorial in Lidice too, on the site where the village once stood. The names of the murdered are carved in stone. The children who were gassed are remembered individually. Gardens bloom where homes once were. The Nazis tried to erase literacy from history. Instead, they made it immortal. Every year on June 10, people gather to remember. The village that was destroyed as punishment now serves as eternal testimony against the regime that destroyed it. Reinhard Heydrich is buried in Berlin's Invalidenfriedhof cemetery, though his grave has been repeatedly vandalized and is now unmarked to prevent it from becoming a neo-Nazi shrine. He's remembered, if at all, as the architect of genocide, the butcher, the hangman, the man with the iron heart that stopped beating because two brave men with a broken gun and a converted mind refused to accept the unacceptable. His death changed nothing and everything. The Holocaust continued. The war raged on. But the myth of invincibility was broken. The price of resistance was established, and people paid it anyway. That might be the most important lesson of Operation Anthropoid. The debate about whether the operation was justified will never be resolved. How do you weigh one life against 1,300? How do you measure the value of symbolic resistance against the reality of murdered children? There's no mathematics that makes the equation balance, no moral calculus that gives a clear answer. We're left with the uncomfortable truth that sometimes in war, especially in wars against totalitarian evil, every choice is terrible and people must choose anyway. The men who planned Anthropoid, who executed it, who died for it and because of it, they didn't have the luxury of hindsight. They had only conviction, courage, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for a chance, however slim, to strike back at the darkness. What we do know is this: Operation Anthropoid was the only successful assassination of a top-ranking Nazi during World War II. Heydrich was the highest-ranking Nazi killed by resistance fighters in the entire war. That's not a small thing. In the vast machinery of Nazi Germany, where obedience was enforced by terror and dissent meant death, two men with improvised weapons managed to kill one of the most protected and most evil men in the regime. They paid for it with their lives. Their families paid. Their country paid. But they did it. They showed it could be done. They proved that even in the darkest hour, even under total occupation, even facing certain death, resistance is possible. Perhaps that's the real legacy of Operation Anthropoid, not the man they killed, but the spirit they embodied. In the end, we're left with questions that have no perfect answers. Was Operation Anthropoid the most important assassination of World War II? In terms of rank and position, absolutely. Heydrich was irreplaceable in ways few other Nazis were. His death disrupted plans and created chaos at the highest levels. Was it worth the cost? That depends on whether you believe symbolic resistance has value beyond immediate military impact, whether you think some evils must be opposed even when opposition seems futile, whether you accept that the price of freedom sometimes includes the lives of those who never chose to pay it. The men of Operation Anthropoid believed it was worth it. The people of literacy had no choice. History records both their sacrifice and asks us to remember why it happened. The most important assassination of World War II killed the Butcher of Prague and cost the lives of thousands. It proved Nazis could be killed and that killing them brought terrible consequences. It secured Czechoslovakia's political future and nearly destroyed its resistance present. It was both a strategic success and a humanitarian catastrophe. It demonstrated the best of human courage and the worst of human cruelty. Perhaps that's fitting for an operation in a war that contained multitudes of contradiction. Operation Anthropoid succeeded in its mission and failed in its hope that the price wouldn't be unbearable. The price was unbearable. They paid it anyway. That's the story. That's the legacy. That's what we're left to remember and to judge.